All right, there we go. So, welcome, Hannah and Kiana. In today's Conservation Careers series with Georgia Audubon, we have Hannah Palmer from Finding the Flint. If you are new here and new to watching the series, we're providing conservation opportunities, information to any and all who would be interested in conservation careers, careers in environmental justice, environmental education, art, all things outdoors. So please feel free to check out some of our other videos. And without further ado, we'll have Hannah get started.
Hi, I'm Hannah Palmer. I am from Clayton County, Georgia. I grew up in Forest Park and I grew up as a little Girl Scout. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the career that I've created that is basically as a storyteller and a writer and a community organizer around environmental issues in the south side of Atlanta. I will share a few slides and talk about my career and the work I'm doing now on Finding the Flint. Does that look okay, you guys? Give me a thumbs up.
Yep, it looks good.
All right, thank you. So I threw in a lot of pictures of me because I want you to see me doing the work, what my work actually looks like. Today, this is a virtual part of my work, being online and speaking to people about Finding the Flint. And I do a lot of this. I do a lot of presentations and talks and storytelling in person. So definitely public speaking is a big part of my job. But then there's just a lot of different pieces of field trips, and I wanted to kind of show what that looks like. On this slide, I'm showing you a picture of my first book. I mentioned I'm a writer. My first book is called Flight Path: A Search for Routes Beneath the World's Busiest Airport. As I said, I grew up in Clayton County. This is the county on the south side of Atlanta where the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport sits. I wrote this book as a memoir to kind of research what had happened to the erased and lost and displaced communities around the airport as the airport was growing. And I was writing a personal story. It turned out it's really the story of thousands of families and businesses around the airport that have been displaced by industrial and airport growth. In the process of writing that book, I discovered I really love history. I love learning about cities, how they're shaped. And an important part of that is water. I learned that the Flint River headwaters are underneath the airport. And that was sort of a surprise to me and a big question and a real curiosity for me. The second picture next to the book is from like last weekend. This is that little baby boy who's on my shoulder on the book cover is now 12, and he's by my side as I'm speaking to an audience in East Point about the history of segregated public swimming pools at a project I created called Ghost Pools. That project is a combination of public art, public history, environmental storytelling, and it's just one of the many kind of projects that I've found my way into that I consider preservation, conservation, and really community activism. So how does there end up being a river underneath the airport? This is a surprise to most of the people I talk to in Atlanta. If people have ever heard of the Flint, it's because they either grew up in South Georgia or because they remember when the Flint flooded, and there was a lot of damage and flooding in the 90s when the river flooded. This is an image of what the river looks like just south of the 5th runway, just on the edge of the airport. And, it's kind of beautiful. It's kind of wild. It's also an urban creek. And like most urban creeks in Atlanta, it's quite degraded and polluted and has a lot of challenges. But this river is really important because it's the second longest river in Georgia, and it's providing important drinking water supply and agricultural water supply for the state. This project is supported by two different nonprofits and the Atlanta Regional Commission. So I'm lucky to be supported by American Rivers and the Conservation Fund. And since we're talking about careers, I'll share that Finding the Flint is a part-time job for me. I get paid by the Conservation Fund and American Rivers to work on Finding the Flint. And then the other projects that I work on, I'm freelance as a writer and as a designer. So this is what the Flint River looks like. This is near Sproul Bluff, which is in Upson County, Georgia. The closest town would be Thomaston, Georgia. And I have to drive about an hour and a half from my house in East Point, Georgia, to get to the river where it looks like a real big, beautiful river. This is a paddling trip from a couple summers ago. I get to go almost every spring to take folks out to experience the river. And it's very beautiful. It's very calm. This is the kind of paddling I like. It's sort of flat and calm. And it's not a lot of like whitewater rapids. You see a lot of wildlife. And by that, I mean otters, osprey, of course, fish, and all the different critters you would expect in the river, like turtles, fish, and snakes and frogs. So it's hard to believe that this is what the river looks like where it starts. This is near where I live. I live in East Point, which is on the north side of the airport. This is the ditch right next to Delta's headquarters where the river is in a concrete channel, and it really just looks like a storm sewer. There's no sign to tell you it's the Flint River, and it's kind of a sad little eyesore. Hard to believe that inside of the airport, there's still sections of the river that look like this. This is on the airport's property. We get to host a cleanup down there a couple times a year and get into this site, which is restricted. It's behind a padlocked barbed wire fence. But there's still little traces of what the river looked like when it was wild and free. It's quite beautiful back there. So I mentioned that I grew up in Clayton County, Georgia, which is quite suburban, and I had never heard of the Flint River except a few places where you might see Flint River Road, Flint River Village. This is my complete knowledge and perception of Georgia's second longest river. I knew it was around somewhere, but I had never seen it, certainly never swam in it or fished in it. And part of the problem is that if you live in South Metro Atlanta, you don't have access to this river. It's quite hidden away. It's in private property, or it's so polluted that you wouldn't want to get close to it. Here's some of the geography I'm talking about. Those of y'all who are from the South Side probably recognize some of these names, but a lot of people don't know where the Flint is. What you're seeing here is centered on the Atlanta airport. These are the east to west runways of the world's busiest airport. And then the airport is right at the top of the Flint River watershed. That means that when it rains at the airport, all of the raindrops are going into the Flint River. But just to the west of the airport, rainfall would be going toward the Chattahoochee River. And to the north and east of the airport, that's the South River watershed. That river flows ultimately to the Atlantic Ocean. So the airport is built right at the intersection of these different watersheds and right on the tiny but important headwaters of the Flint River. So what does it mean when you build a gigantic transportation infrastructure on the top of a creek or a series of creeks? And not just an airport. We built Turner Field on the top of Entrenchment Creek, and the Georgia World Congress Center on the top of Proctor Creek. So all of that impervious surface contributes to runoff and erosion downstream. It's terrible for the river. The water has got to go somewhere, and it ends up blasting our neighbors downstream. This is just south of the airport. Of course, any urban river is going to see litter and dumping. Unfortunately, this is pretty common. If a river is out of sight and out of mind, lots of folks think that they can just pull over and dump stuff into it. So this is the thing. These are some of the things we've pulled out of the Flint River over the years. There's a specific issue, though. The Flint River deals with airport pollution, and that is unique. Most of the other rivers in Atlanta aren't seeing jet fuel, de-icing fluid, and sewage spills that the Flint River has to survive. And unfortunately, I've taken all these photos, so I've seen and smelled jet fuel spilled into the river on many occasions. It's a big crisis for, not only for the wildlife, but for the people just down in Clayton and Fayette County who draw drinking water from the Flint River. And then over the years of compounded construction of the headwaters, I mentioned the water's got to go somewhere. And with climate change, with intense and juicy storms that just park over Atlanta, we've seen pretty severe and tragic flooding along the Flint headwaters. This is a drone photo from Upper Riverdale Road. That is the bridge. It's just completely underwater, and it's cutting off access between folks who are trying to get to from 75 to Southern Regional Medical Center, which is the only ER, the only hospital in Clayton County. So it becomes like a matter of life and death when this river floods. Folks can't get to the emergency room. So part of what I've been trying to do with Finding the Flint, and I'm working with a large team of people. Again, I'm a writer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. And I'm not a politician, but I've been working with a lot of folks across all these different disciplines to bring awareness to the Flint River. And that starts with just putting this river back on the map, putting up signs. When we started this project in 2017, the river was very unknown. And we've lobbied with the county to get them to just put up some signs so that people at least know if you're going to dump tires, know that you're dumping it in the river that we all depend on. So I cheered when they put up these signs. And then in addition to just talking about the river, raising awareness, we're proposing a number of conservation opportunities. This is an area, again, that map around the airport that people have just sort of forgotten that there was a river there. And they really treated it like an industrial landscape. And we're trying to propose nature preserves, trails, parks, and just different ways to treat this land so that we can see and explore and enjoy the river again. One of those examples is called Headwaters Nature Preserve. It's right in College Park. And this is a rendering of what it might look like if we restored this little 7-acre piece of land right where the river first daylights. The river, I should mention, up at the very source, it starts as a spring. There was a historic street called Spring Street, and there is water coming up from the ground, and it's always flowing. And that's where the river begins. And it looks sort of like this. This is the river flowing through East Point and College Park. And it's, again, just looks like a little creek on the north side of the airport, but we've encouraged the city to claim it as the headwater. So they put up these signs, and we've helped the cities of East Point, College Park, and Hapeville to design trails that could connect people not only across the different communities, but back to the river that's currently sort of forgotten and out of the way. Here's that picture I showed you earlier of Delta's property. We've worked with Delta in the airport to design what it could look like as a park. It's about 2.5 acres of land that we could restore as a meandering creek and create green space for the community and for all those folks who work at Delta. On the south side of the airport, here's that spot where I just showed you massive flooding. We've worked with the hospital and the local community and the schools and the parks department and the water authority to imagine trails and parks there where we restore the river and create places for people to enjoy the restored river. And then in addition, here's one of those photos of me out doing my crazy job, just exploring up and down the Flint River headwaters in this area that's considered totally industrial. We found amazing cultural resources. This is the ruins of a grist mill. Here's a photo of what the mill looked like in the 40s. And just bringing some of these forgotten treasures back into people's lives, creating trails and access to them is something that we're really interested in doing because, again, I grew up in Clayton County. I never even knew the river was there, much less that it was so beautiful and so rich with history and culture. So big part of doing any kind of conservation work, whether you're a scientist or if you're focused on policy or, you're going to have to do community engagement. You're going to have to get people excited and inspired. And as much as I love doing talks like this, it's also really important that you get people off their computers and out of boardrooms and out to actually experience this place that we're saying is so special. So I mentioned that the airport has given us permission a couple times a year to go down to the river inside of the airport's property and conduct a cleanup. We did this in April on Earth Day, and it was maybe our 5th cleanup and the biggest one we've ever done. We had over 80 volunteers, and all of these folks in the photo are airport employees. So, I want to tell everybody about the Flint River. I want to get everybody excited. But then there's certain folks who are the influencers, the local community, the workers who have a very personal connection to the river. And it's so important that they see it and experience it. So this was a big success. I couldn't do this without the partnership of the airport itself and the Flint River Keeper. We also partner with Clayton State University, which is on the south side of Atlanta. It's in Morrow, and their campus is near the Flint River. So it's been great to get the students of Clayton State University, the chemistry students, environmental science students, as well as other subjects like media production, involved in this event called Southside River Rendezvous. In the field of conservation, you have to create opportunities, like I said, for people to get out and see the river, but also to build capacity. That means teach people tools to make a difference in the environment. In this case, we teach all of our volunteers, and there's usually 100 people at this event, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, young people, old people, students, volunteers from all over Atlanta. We teach them how to do water quality monitoring. That means we train them on how to go out to the creek, gather samples of water in a little plastic bag, and bring them back to the lab where Clayton State students process the samples and study the samples for pollution and different water quality metrics that would tell us if there's a problem. Of course, every time we do this, we discover lots of problems, and then it becomes a lesson in civics, because how do you then follow up with the different layers of government who are responsible for protecting our environment? This is a fun event, and it's a way to get a lot of people out and discovering both the beauty and the challenges facing our creeks. Here's me giving a tour just a couple Saturdays ago. I give a lot of tours. I do enjoy getting out and exploring, and this is a spot in College Park that folks drive by all the time, but they would never know that this is an important section of the Flint River. So I take bus tours of people around to see these sites, to explore, and to talk about the conditions that we see. This is in East Point. I'm with a group of, this is called the Atlanta Watershed Learning Network. I want to recommend to y'all, if you're interested in these issues, if you're in the Atlanta area, the Atlanta Watershed Learning Network is a terrific program where residents learn about green space, green infrastructure, water flooding issues, and they build projects to address those issues. And I've enjoyed working with them over the last several years. This is a group of University of Georgia ecology students who I took a couple weeks ago to find the Flint, and we're out visiting the site next to Delta. So again, conservation careers can span all kinds of skill sets. I want to tell you that when I was in high school, I had no idea this would be my job, but I'm not surprised. I always loved theater and drama, and always felt a kind of energy from getting up in front of a crowd and telling a story. And this is how I'm using that skill, bringing people out into my neighborhood to show them environmental issues. Same deal. This is a totally different group. I take busloads of leaders, activists, community groups, business owners, elected officials, and we take them out to find the Flint. And once they've seen these little creeks, I give them a sticker that says, "I found the Flint," because I want them to also tell other people about it, spread the word, and feel empowered to discover the creeks in their neighborhood that also need some attention and some love. I'll tell you something wild. This past spring, I went to France and talked about the Flint. I was invited by this group in Marseille, France. They're in the south of France. And this is a group of artists who are working on a very similar urban creek restoration project. These projects are happening all over the world. And it was amazing to me that they invited me to come to Marseille, France, and tell them about the Flint River and the work we're doing, the coalition we're building around this forgotten but really important river. And this is me, sort of trying to talk in French, being translated. And I just want you to know that the work that I'm doing is hyper local. This is where I was born, where I'm raised, where I live. I can tell you everything about the Flint headwaters in this certain airport geography, but it's relevant all over the world, because wherever there's water, wherever there's people, we're all trying to figure out how to balance development and growth and good conservation and good quality of life for communities who live in near these creeks and rivers. And then another important part of the job that I really love is getting out to go paddling. So where I live in East Point, if you want to go paddle on a river, you either got to drive an hour north or an hour and a half south. Um, and it's a very different experience to get in and swim in the Flint River or paddle in the river than to do some of the urban exploring that I've just described. And it can be scary if you've never been out in a canoe. When I started this project, I had never been in a canoe. Um, and I certainly had never swam in the Flint River. And I needed somebody to show me that it was safe, to take me out there, show me where to get a canoe, where's a safe place to go swim. Is this water clean enough? You just have, there's a lot of questions that we have about safety. And I feel it is part of my amazing job right now to expand this experience to my community and to show folks where you can go rent a canoe and where you can go put in your canoe and swim and fish and enjoy the river. Unfortunately, it's a privilege, and it's a class privilege, and it's part of my white privilege, I think, to have grown up swimming in creeks and rivers. But it was because I always had someone to take me by the hand and show me where we could do that. So this is a cool part of my job. And on this particular paddle, we took the mayor of College Park and a bunch of staff from College Park, as well as some of my neighbors and volunteers from East Point and Clayton County. And for everybody, I think on that trip, it was their first time actually getting to paddle on the Flint River. We had a great time. I mentioned politics. I'm, afraid of politics, and I'm never going to run for office, but a big part of my job is speaking to politicians. This is me talking with a county commissioner in Clayton County. Again, maybe that's the drama club that I learned how to get up in front of a crowd and tell a story, but this is part of the job for sure, is making a case for people who have the power to make change. And then I have to say, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of my job is meetings, is bringing together people to talk about issues. If you like planning parties, if you like hosting gatherings, if you have a knack for getting people to gather around and talk, you always have to provide snacks and coffee. But this is a big part of the job of conservation, is building a coalition, building a group of people who are willing to listen, who are willing to take time away from their busy jobs and their busy days to talk about issues. And this is what I call the Finding the Flint Advisory Board, which consists of folks from all of the jurisdictions I've mentioned, and as well as some state level and regional level leaders, including in this picture, I see the Clayton County Office of Resilience, the Clayton County Water Authority, the Partnership for Southern Equity, Georgia Power is in this photo, the Atlanta Regional Commission, as well as the cities of East Point, College Park, and Hapeville. So I think that's one of my skills, is I'm a pretty social person. I thrive on the energy of lots of people. This isn't for everyone, but it's a big part of my job, is kind of being a ringleader for all these different groups. Through all the work I've been doing on Finding the Flint, I'm going to tell you about another project I created, because like I said, the issues on the Flint River are similar to issues all over Atlanta. Any creek inside the perimeter, it suffers from being unknown. A lot of people don't know the names of creeks. They are often polluted. They're often degraded. This is not unique. We have urban creeks all over the place that need some love. So I created a website and a concept called Atlanta Creek League. Working with some friends, we just did this on the side. You can go to atlantacreekleague.com and you can put in your address, and it should tell you what your local creek is. And then you can get involved in supporting your local creek. You can get t-shirts and stickers and get connected to your neighbors around creek stewardship and creek conservation activities. I just wanted to create something kind of fun, because often you guys, if you work in conservation, you're going to see a lot of stuff that makes you angry, that makes you upset, and that makes you feel defeated. It feels like we're always kind of outmatched by bigger politics or bigger businesses that have more money and more power than we do. So I want to stick with the thing that makes creeks wonderful, and is that they're beautiful, they're joyful. We all share them, we all can enjoy them. And so that's what the idea of Atlanta Creek League was, is like people should have fun getting to know their creek and their neighbors at the same time. So my creek is personally Utoy Creek. I live in East Point on the west side of town, and my local creek is Utoy Creek. And this is me with some folks at the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance. They are also located in Utoy Creek. We did a cleanup at Cascade Springs. And then one more project, I'm going to end with this and then open it up to tell you, answer your questions or tell you more about any of these things I'm involved in. This is the project I mentioned at the beginning. It's called Ghost Pools. All this looking at water, lost water, got me thinking about where people used to swim in Atlanta. And I discovered that there's some lost swimming pools in East Point where I live. There was a white pool and a black pool, and they were both filled in rather than integrated, unfortunately. And that is a common story across not just the South, across the whole country. A lot of swimming pools are hidden in the landscape. Old swimming pools we lost because they're very expensive to maintain, for one, and two, they were really lost during the era of desegregation. So that's my latest project I've been working on, is telling that story in public. I did not think of myself as a visual artist. I understand graphic design and writing, but this project has pushed me to think about public space and telling stories in public space in a way that gets people thinking, remembering, and asking questions. When we did opening night for Ghost Pools a couple weeks ago, this is just part of the crowd that came out to see Balethnic perform at the site of the old swimming pools. And it's been really a joy to tell that story. Just the last couple of things I wanted to tell you before I wrap up and answer your questions. This is the Atlanta Urban Ecologists. Some of y'all may be familiar with this group. I take them to see the Flint River every year. And it's a fantastic program for young people who are interested in all the different environmental issues facing Atlanta and all the wonderful, the biodiversity, the wonderful landscapes. We live in an incredible part of the world, not just part of the country. Georgia is just rich with so many different landscapes and animals and plants. And this is a great program to have an introduction to some of that exciting work. I also talked a bit about West Atlanta Watershed Alliance. If you're not following them already on Instagram or Facebook, and if you're in the Atlanta area, this is an amazing nonprofit that is creating opportunities for young people to get involved in lots of different ways in water work and restoration and conservation work. So I just want to introduce those as great opportunities for young people to get their boots dirty and roll up their sleeves and get to work. So Atlanta Creek League, West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, and the Atlanta Urban Ecologists. And then just to jump back to like what I would say is some advice for those of y'all pondering a career in conservation, or the advice that I wish somebody had given me, because I think I knew from the time I was like a young Girl Scout that I loved the outdoors and I loved the environment, and I wanted to be part of protecting the world, saving the earth and protecting the environment. But here I am, a writer. I was an English major in college, and I have a master's degree in writing. It took me a while to put those things together and understand that my skill as a writer and storyteller was important to the conservation movement. It was important to the issues that I cared about, climate change, environmental justice, how cities thrive and decline. So I wish I had known sooner that the work of conservation requires artists, requires storytellers, videographers. If you are good at making TikToks, you can get a job working for an environmental nonprofit, I guarantee you. Because, scientists understand the risk to, communities, scientists understand climate change, but they have got to convince politicians and regular people to care. And making that translation, making that connection is often the job of us writers and storytellers and artists. And I include in artists, musicians, filmmakers, sculptors. I'm using my skill set as an artist, and even that I mentioned performing arts and theater, that is part of, what I'm using and in my toolkit to try to, activate change. So that's some advice I wish I had known sooner, that you can bring all parts of your personality. You can bring your family, your faith, um, your identity to this work, and you will find a place to plug in, because we need all the help we can get here in the conservation world. We need creative minds and different ways of doing this work. So I hope that's an encouragement to you all. I think that creative young people are going to be the ones who help solve these problems for the next generation. And that's certainly the lucky role that I found myself in, is getting to be creative in this world. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, but there's a lot of work to be done. Thanks for listening. I'm delighted to talk more about any of these projects, or myself, or the work I'm doing. Y'all have questions?
Yes. So thank you so much, Hannah. I learned a lot. I was definitely going through. I've been to quite a few of those places. Done work on Proctor Creek and with Wawa. So it was great to learn a lot about where these places like kind of all come together. All of the different buildings that are on top of all these different rivers, streams, and creeks. I'm like, I don't know what Atlanta's thing is with building things on top of environment things. But yeah, very informative. So we do have questions. Oh, and for any other questions outside of the ones that we have here, if anyone would like to email either myself, it's just Sheridan.Alford@GeorgiaAudubon.org, or Kiana, which is Kiana Leverett, at GeorgiaAudubon.org for any information or anything like that. We'll be happy to answer follow-ups.
Oh, and let me then add, you can reach me, Hannah, at findingtheflint.org, HANNAH at findingtheflint.org. You can also sign up on findingtheflint.org for our newsletter, or follow Finding the Flint on social media to see what we're up to.
Lovely. And I will put, or if Kiana can put the links in the chat, that'll be awesome while I ask these questions. So the first one says, how does studying environmental history differ from regular history? So yeah, they're kind of different, but almost one and the same. So,
well, I did not study either one. There may be a academic definition that's different between those things. I've been interested in studying environmental history as it relates to how cities grow. And, I find that, like, if you look at the history of the Flint River, if you just focus on that geography or that particular feature of the geography, you would see the story of the indigenous people, the Muskogee Creek people who settled along the Flint River, the European explorers, the De Sotos, and the Spanish colonists that then called it, they took it and they named it the Flint. Then you would get to the history of the white settlers in 1821 who laid out the railroads to kind of come around the Flint, and then to the airport developers who developed the airport on this cheap flat land that was at the headwaters. You could see the whole history of our civilization just by studying the history of this river. But again, you could go way beyond before people. You could go deep into the geology, 200 million years of history of where this water came from and how it got underground. And probably maybe environmental history is like not studying the human dominance of the land. Maybe that's the difference.
Yeah. And while you were talking, I was thinking the same thing that you said there at the end. It's almost like human history will stop at some point, and
it's so short.
Right. In relative relation to everything else. But yeah, environmental history, like you said, it'll just go back and go all the way to when the river was created itself. So
I love how ancient the river is. I love that it was here before any humans.
Right.
And it'll be there after we're gone.
Right.
It comforts me.
And I think one of the cooler things that I've heard about this environmental history and regular history, or human history, I think it was someone from the Atlanta Preservation Center, but they were just saying, like, the land will always tell you the past and the future of a place. So you know, like you said, the river being there before humans were there, it'll be here after we're here, you know, or it'll be, hopefully, and it will come
I
back.
like that.
So,
And that's, I mean, part of what we're doing with Finding the Flint is trying to say this river, it's always going to be here. How do we balance this city
right,
that we're creating with the river that's going to insist on its own existence? It's
right.
going to keep flooding us and dictating how we build and live. So let's work with the river, not against it.
Exactly. Next question. So you mentioned writing. How has writing and different styles of writing helped you in your work? Whether that's like getting people involved or portraying a message, you know, in a well-received way. There's a lot of different ways that people can use writing.
Great question. I have a lot to say about that. I'll try to keep it short. When let's see, when I started grad school, I was writing poetry.
Mhm.
And I think poetry taught me to be an observer, to pay close attention, and to learn the words for things that were in the environment that were, you know, just weird, mysterious art, you know, nature things, or even like um, in the built environment. There's just a lot of stuff. Like, what's a bollard? What's a, you know, what's a
Right.
catkin? I had to. So poetry taught me to really dig into like words and understanding objects and just being an observer of change and an observer of the environment. Um, so those of y'all who are lyricists, poets, or visual artists as well, you're paying
Right.
attention to the world and you're keen observers, and it's so important that those voices be part of conservation. I kind of grew up as a writer at the time of like when Facebook was being created and people started blogging. Blogging
Mhm.
was like this new art form that was very personal, that was like, I noticed this and it made me care about this. And
Right.
so the style that I write in is very much, I thought it was very blog influence. It's personal, it's like half memoir, half research. But
Right.
I also came up in the church and I grew up hearing sermons every week. And
Mhm.
I think sermons is an art form as well, where you start with a personal anecdote and you
Right.
talk about how that led to a certain curiosity, to a certain scripture or text that you're then going to explore together, and then you're going to bring it back to the personal. So those are
Yeah.
three art forms that people might not even think of as art forms: poetry, lyricism, blogging, and sermons, that have been big influences on the way I write. I almost always write with the I pronoun. Like I
Mhm.
start with like, I'm not a journalist. I do not divorce myself from the subject or try to be unbiased. I think everyone has a perspective. Everyone is biased. So that's my way in. So if you look on my website, hannahspalmer.com, a lot of the writing I do is nonfiction. I don't write fiction at all. I don't really write poetry anymore either. I thought of poetry as a form of essay writing, of like
Mhm.
understanding a subject and exploring it with poetic impulse, with questions.
Right.
Um, so I'm sorry to say I have too much to say about
No,
that,
that's
but I
good.
want to
Yeah.
I want to just open it up to like, you know, you don't have to be doing scientific writing or investigative journalism.
Right.
Those are not my jam. I read a lot of that, but it's not what I do. I'm always bringing a kind of personal angle to like, why do I care and why should somebody else care?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's very important for any type of work someone does. It's like figure out what you like to do and what works best for you. Like me, I'm not the person to get somebody like persuade people. Some people are really good persuaders, and you know they're really good at, like you said, the politics and that part of it. But I'm not, so I wouldn't, you know, go down that route. But I might do something else that has an equal benefit. So definitely playing on strengths for sure. Um, I think this one is similar to the last one, kind of a follow-up. So if you're interested in environmental history and writing in both of the capacities we already talked about, they ask what should you pursue as a major. So
Hmm.
I know you went to, or well, I think, please correct me, you went to school for writing.
Yeah, I went to Agnes Scott College undergrad and I studied English literature and creative writing. So I
Mhm.
was just reading like Victorian novels and short stories and poetry. I was not reading environmental history work, and I wasn't reading. I mean, I was just reading because I like reading.
Right.
And then in grad school, I studied creative writing and I still was reading a lot of great literature. I mean, I think just do what you love. If you love reading environmental history, that's what you should major in. If you want to pursue writing, I think there are now programs for like environmental
Yeah.
writing. There's certainly a lot of classes in environmental writing, and there's a term that's kind of new called eco memoir, which is probably what my work now fits into. There's just a lot of amazing memoirs that are focused on a certain landscape
Mhm.
and understanding what's happened to that landscape. I got a long list of them I can share. But I don't know that you need to major in any sort of thing. Like
Mhm.
you can find your way into this work even if you studied business, even if you studied
Right.
poetry. You can get a job doing this work through a lot of different majors. Like I said, when I was doing my English undergrad, people would be like, what are you going to do with that? I was like, I don't know. I'm just doing it. I'm doing 4 years
Right.
of reading amazing literature. That's what I'm doing. What I'm going to like, am I going to teach literature one day? I don't know. I don't
Right.
know.
Maybe.
Am I going to write literature one day? Maybe. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
have to know, but I would say if you're thinking about a college major, find something you're just going to really love spending 4 years doing.
Right. Right. Definitely tea. I was gonna say, Kiana, definitely chime in. We can hear you fine. I know we're scratchy, but yeah, I'm
Okay.
trying to think back.
What did y'all major in?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to think back to like how did I get to where I ended up?
Oh my goodness. I remember mine because I changed my major a couple times. I started off as an animal science major, and then I transitioned into a wildlife biology program. And then I ended up finishing with environmental science, natural resource management, and wildlife biology as the minor. So I feel like I had a colorful college experience. I learned a lot about a lot of different environmental topics. So it was fun.
Impressive.
Right. And I think to both of y'all's points, doing what you love and then also not being afraid to change it. Like you're allowed to change it while you're there. So I start similar to Kiana, I started out in animal science. And then I think sophomore year I changed it to wildlife science. I enjoyed that a lot. And people always, I wanted to be a vet for my whole life. And everybody asks how I ended up over here. But yeah, I took like a random intro to natural resources class just as a elective. And I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. So I knew I liked animals and I knew that I had some sort of interest in the outdoors and like ecology, natural resources. So I just searched up what other majors my school had. I went to UGA, searched up what other colleges they had, and that's how I found wildlife science. And then by the end of it, I liked birds. So I had narrowed it down a little bit more. I liked birds. I did a lot of like random volunteering, or being like a lab assistant for research, just random stuff. They'll pay you a little bit. So doing random things. And then
try random things. That's good advice.
Right. Definitely
try everything that you can, really. Yeah. Like my piece of advice would be to have a colorful experience. It took my the person that was, I think, the dean of our college at the time, like sitting me down and saying, you are always allowed to change your mind.
Yes.
Because I think oftentimes there's pressure when you go to school to commit to a major and then finish it out. And then you realize, like, after the first 2 months that you don't like it and that you want to pivot to something else. Like, you are allowed to change your mind whenever.
Definitely.
I think it's scary too when you're a first generation college student. Like if you didn't have parents who went, my parents didn't go to college. And I was afraid that like, I got to get this right. My whole future depends on this. My family's future depends,
right.
And I don't think college actually works that way. You got to finish, you got to go spend your 4 years. You need to finish, but really what you do within that time, the whole college is your laboratory. The whole world is your classroom. And when people offer you an opportunity, just say yes. I would like to go learn more about birds, and you may take a class and be like, I thought I wanted to be pre-law, but this is boring. or I
Yeah.
thought I wanted to do business, and you just might get excited about something you weren't expecting, and you got to be flexible.
Yeah.
It's
There's-
okay.
Yeah.
Right. There's
I do.
clubs, there's all types of things.
I do have another question for you, Hannah, because you do a lot of work with rivers, with water, through water cleanups. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, other than swimming, are there practical skills you should learn if you want to work with water, rivers?
I've been surprised people I work with who don't know how to swim. So learning to swim is a life-giving skill and a life-saving skill. I do think everybody should do it, but it's not a deal breaker. Some comfort in the outdoors is helpful. A lot of folks are, really scared of snakes, really scared of ticks.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have to like turn off that part of my brain that worries too much and like wear good gear, like cover everything. So if I encounter a snake or a tick, it's not going to get to my skin. So trying to get your hands on some good gear, some good waders or something so you can feel a little more relaxed is helpful. I feel empowered by knowing about watersheds, by understanding how things are connected. That map I showed you of all the watersheds, I just love knowing wherever I go, I'm in a watershed and it's connected. Like I'm actually calling y'all today from North Carolina, and I had to know what this creek is called, Tomahawk Creek, and it joins the Swanoa River, which joins the French Broad. I just wanted to understand, like, first of all, the indigenous history of the land empowers me to understand who was here before, and then the watershed. So I'm giving you some random tools that I find give me some confidence. Seriously, having good gear, not being alone and nobody should be alone, but particularly women and people of color, it's just not, it doesn't feel good or safe to be alone in the woods. And then having just a little bit of knowledge about how creeks and rivers are connected and what ecoregion I'm in, that stuff is good. What else should people need to know to work with water? Oh, if you can get a visit to a wastewater treatment plant, it is just life-changing.
Yeah.
To go on a tour.
Absolutely.
And most can give you a tour. Like if you just ask, they will give you a tour. They have group tours where they welcome the public. It's your taxpayer dollars paying for water treatment and wastewater treatment. And it is just like an eye-opening experience to know every time you put something down the toilet, where it goes. This is invisible infrastructure that we all depend on and rely on 24/7. And we have no concept of how it works. So wherever you're working in the world of water, find your way to the water treatment plants in your community and see how that's funded and how it's taken care of. You'll feel like when, I don't know if you were ever watching Sesame Street as a kid and they would visit a factory, or if you were ever a Girl Scout and got to visit some sort of like behind the scenes factory, but this is how cities really work. This is fundamentally how civilization works.
It's really interesting actually visiting one, because I know, at least in my experience when I went, I just was immediately rethinking how much water I use in a day and like where it all goes, how it comes back, and how much of a privilege that is. Like just to know that like, if I turn my faucet on, like there's always going to be water coming out of it, or that my shower is going to like be clean, or that I'm going to have water that I can drink that's clean. Just amazing. And then thinking about how much water you use, just like even in your morning routine, is an interesting thought to have, and it makes you look at the world.
It makes me thirsty.
Yes. And I think, okay, it's 11:53. I was trying to checking the time, make sure we were still good. Well, to wrap up, one overarching question would just be, how would people, especially younger people, get involved or be impactful for rivers like the Flint or Proctor Creek, or all of those? You mentioned some links, and so I put some of them in the chat, so they should be in there. But
yep, wherever you go, you're in a watershed. And it's great to try to learn what your local creek is and how it's connected to your local river. it's hard in Atlanta because you can't see all these creeks. They're kind of hidden away. And you may not feel that you can access the Chattahoochee or the Flint or the South River. And the city was designed that way so that you don't have to see or experience or any of these creeks or rivers. And we've been a bit robbed of our natural resources in that way. So wherever you are in Georgia, I would just look at a map and see if you can find your local creek and see what it's connected to. It's likely that there's an organization in your area that is working to advocate for or steward those creeks and rivers. The Chattahoochee Riverkeeper works across the state. The Flint Riverkeeper works across the state. And there's other riverkeeper organizations like the Altamaha Riverkeeper, the Georgia Coast Keeper, the Coosa, they're all over the state. And if you're curious, go to like Waterkeeper Alliance. That's the national, or maybe it's global organization that, kind of accredits these different nonprofits that are the ones taking care of and watching out for our creeks and rivers. Georgia River Network is a terrific website and a great organization that works all across the state on everything from like the Okefenokee to up in the North Georgia mountains. And that I would say, like, learn globally, learn statewide, but then figure out what is the local group. And in your neighborhood, it might be a church, it might be a neighborhood organization that's doing the cleanups and taking care. And the experience that you have of meeting with those neighbors and getting out on a Saturday morning to clean up, I think these are acts that change us. We make a difference to the river temporarily, but it changes us forever, because you'll never look at plastic bottles the same way again. When you see somebody who experiences flooding, you think about rainwater and stormwater differently. It's such a eye-opening. I call it like the gateway drug to environmentalism, is getting out on a weekend and doing these little creek activities and saying, wow, this is all connected. Definitely. Development, justice, pollution, it affects all of us, but you can just lose touch with that if you never see or touch the water.
Right. How much stuff actually stacks up on top of each other when you start to learn about the layers, for sure. Well, that wraps up this Conservation Career Series episode. Thank you, Hannah Palmer from Finding the Flint. And again, thank you, Kiana Leverett and myself, Sheridan Alford from Georgia Audubon. Please stay tuned for our next installment, which will be in August. We'll start back up in August. And yeah, we will send out the links of the recording and any information that Hannah would like to share, and some of these links that we've already shared in the chat. And with that, I will leave you all for the day.
Thank you for the invitation. Have a great summer.
Yes, thanks for coming.
You too. Everyone have a good one.
Bye.